I came home early and found my sister sitting on my kitchen floor, so hard she couldn't catch her breath. But that wasn't what made my blood run cold. What stopped me in the doorway was the sight of her in-laws sitting comfortably in my living room, as if they owned the place. There were folders spread across my coffee table, legal documents, bank forms, property records, and right on top of the stack was a copy of the deed to my house. My house. The house I had spent 12 years earning. The house I had bought after deployments, missed holidays, sleepless nights, and more sacrifices than I could count. My sister looked terrified. Her mother-in-law was smiling. Her father-in-law had a pen in his hand. And when I asked what they were doing in my home, the man actually looked me in the eye and said, "This is a family matter. It doesn't concern you." I remember staring at him for several seconds. Then I slowly closed the front door behind me because at that moment, I realized something. These people had no idea whose house they had walked into, and before the day was over, they were going to regret it. Part 1. My name is Emma Carter. I'm a major in the United States Army. At the time all of this happened, I was 32 years old and stationed at Fort Liberty. Most people assumed that because I wore a uniform and carried myself calmly, very little could surprise me anymore. They were wrong. Life always finds new ways to shock you. 3 days before that afternoon, I had completed a training exercise ahead of schedule. I was supposed to return home the following evening. Instead, I decided to drive through the night and surprise my younger sister Rachel and her baby. Rachel had been staying with me for almost 6 months. Officially, she was taking a break from her marriage. Unofficially, she was exhausted. Her husband, Daniel, wasn't a bad man. That was the tragedy. He wasn't cruel, he wasn't violent, he wasn't unfaithful. He was simply too weak to stand up to his parents, and his parents had spent years controlling every aspect of his life. Rachel used to defend them. She'd say things like, "They're old-fashioned," or "They mean well," or, my personal favorite, "That's just how they are." But over time, even Rachel stopped believing those excuses. Victor and Linda Graves weren't merely controlling. They were manipulative. The kind of people who viewed every relationship as a transaction, every kindness as leverage, every weakness as an opportunity. The first time I met them, Victor spent 20 minutes asking about my salary. The second time, Linda wanted to know exactly how much my house was worth. I should have paid more attention. Instead, I simply kept my distance. I wasn't married to them. Rachel was. As I pulled into my driveway that afternoon, I noticed an unfamiliar black sedan parked near the curb. I frowned. Rachel wasn't expecting visitors. Neither was I. Then I heard crying before I even opened the front door. Not loud crying, not dramatic crying, the kind that comes after hours of holding everything in. The sound instantly tightened something inside my chest. I pushed the door open and walked into a nightmare. Rachel sat on the kitchen floor. Her cheeks were red, mascara stained her face. Her hands trembled as she clutched a tissue. Little Noah, her 8-month-old son, slept upstairs, completely unaware of the storm unfolding below. Meanwhile, Victor and Linda sat comfortably in my living room. Victor was flipping through papers. Linda was sipping coffee from one of my mugs. My mug? As though she belonged there. For several seconds, nobody moved. Then Linda smiled. The sight of that smile still makes me angry. "Emma," she said, "you're home early." Rachel looked up. The relief on her face nearly broke my heart. "Emma," her voice cracked. I walked directly to her, ignored everyone else, knelt beside her. "What happened?" Rachel opened her mouth, then glanced nervously toward Victor. That told me everything. I stood slowly, deliberately, and turned toward him. "What are you doing here?" Victor leaned back comfortably. "As I said, this is family business." I looked at the folders on the table. The documents weren't arranged randomly. Someone had been reviewing them carefully, analyzing them, planning something. My eyes settled on a familiar page. Property tax records for my address. I felt my pulse slow. That always happened when I got angry. The calmer I looked, the more dangerous my thoughts became. Why do you have documents related to my house? Linda laughed softly. Oh, don't be dramatic. That answer told me more than any explanation could have. People who aren't guilty usually answer questions. People who are guilty try to dismiss them. I stepped closer. Victor finally sat upright. For the first time, I saw uncertainty flicker across his face. Just a little, not enough. Answer the question. Rachel suddenly stood. Emma. I turned toward her, her eyes filled with tears again. They want me to sign something. The room went silent. Victor immediately spoke. It's not what you're making it sound like. I ignored him. What do they want you to sign? Rachel looked down. Neither of us noticed at first that her hands were clutching a folder. She held it against her chest like a shield. Then she walked toward me. Slowly, quietly, Victor rose from his chair a little too quickly. Rachel. That single word sounded more like a warning than a name. Rachel froze. I stepped between them. The look on Victor's face changed instantly. He wasn't used to resistance, especially not from women. Especially not from women who weren't afraid of him. Rachel slipped the folder into my hands. Read it. Victor's face lost color. Only a little, but enough. My instincts immediately sharpened. I opened the folder. The first page looked like a loan application. The second page contained mortgage information. The third page made my stomach tighten. Power of attorney forms, property authorization documents, financial disclosures. And then I saw something that made every piece suddenly fit together. My name, my address, my house. Again and again and again. The room seemed unnaturally quiet. I could hear the ticking clock on the wall, the hum of the refrigerator, the distant sound of a lawnmower outside. Victor took one careful step forward. Emma, before you jump to conclusions. I raised my hand. He stopped speaking. For the first time since entering my home, I understood exactly why Rachel had been crying. This wasn't family help. This wasn't financial planning. This wasn't concern. This was something else. Something much darker. I slowly closed the folder, then looked directly at Victor, and what I saw in his eyes confirmed my worst suspicion. He wasn't worried that I had misunderstood. He was worried that I had understood perfectly. I didn't yell. That was the first thing Victor Graves failed to understand about me. Men like him expected anger to be loud. They expected slammed doors, shaking fingers, raised voices, the kind of chaos they could point to later and say, "See, she's unstable." So, I gave him none of that. I stood in my own living room holding a folder full of documents that should never have existed, and kept my voice so calm that Linda stopped smiling. "Rachel," I said without taking my eyes off Victor, "take Noah upstairs and pack a bag." Rachel blinked. "What?" "Pack enough for you and the baby for a few days." Victor gave a dry laugh. "Now that's unnecessary." I looked at him. He stopped laughing. Rachel hesitated only a second before she moved. I heard her footsteps rush up the stairs, then the soft creak of the nursery door. For the first time since I'd walked in, she had something to do besides sit there and be afraid. Linda set my mug down too carefully. "Emma, this is getting out of hand." "No," I said. "It got out of hand before I came home." Victor picked up one of the papers and tapped it with his finger, trying to recover the confidence he had walked in with. "You don't understand what you're looking at. Rachel and Daniel are in a difficult financial position. We were simply discussing options. Options involving my house." He smiled tightly. Your sister lives here, that creates certain realities. I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because the arrogance was so complete it felt unreal. Rachel is a guest in my home. I said she has no ownership interest here. Families don't talk like that. Criminals do. Linda inhaled sharply. Victor's jaw hardened. There it was, the first crack. I walked to the coffee table and began separating the papers. Loan forms, property records, draft authorizations, a document that looked like a power of attorney, another that appeared to give Rachel authority to act on behalf of a property owner on behalf of me. But I had never signed anything. I had never discussed anything. I had never even hinted that my home could be used to rescue the Graves family from whatever hole they had dug for themselves. I took out my phone and photographed every page. Victor stepped forward. You don't have permission to do that. I looked around my living room. My house, my documents, my coffee table. His face flushed. Linda stood, then smoothing her cardigan with trembling hands. She was the type of woman who used softness like a weapon. Her voice dropped into that wounded, motherly tone that had fooled Rachel for years. Emma, you have no idea how much stress Daniel has been under. Victor's company has had some temporary issues. The bank is pressuring us. We came here because Rachel is family, because we thought she understood sacrifice. That word hit something old inside me. Sacrifice. People loved using that word when they wanted somebody else to pay the bill. I thought about 12 years in uniform, missed birthdays, cold mornings on training fields. The first house I rented near a base with furniture from a thrift store and a mattress on the floor. The deployments where I counted days by phone calls I couldn't make. Every promotion I earned, while people back home told me I was lucky to have steady pay. And now these people were sitting in my living room calling theft a sacrifice. What temporary issues? I asked. Linda glanced at Victor. He answered too quickly. Business cash flow. What kind of business? Distribution. What kind of debt? His eyes narrowed. That's private. But my deed isn't. He looked away. That silence was an answer. Rachel came downstairs 15 minutes later with Noah against her hip and a duffel bag over her shoulder. The baby looked sleepy and warm, his cheek pressed against her collarbone. Seeing him made the room feel smaller, more fragile. Rachel's eyes moved from me to Victor. I want them to leave, she whispered. Victor's face changed instantly. Not anger first, disbelief, as if Rachel had broken some natural law by speaking against him. Rachel, he said, don't be foolish. She flinched. I hated that flinch. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't visible enough for strangers to notice, but I knew my sister. That tiny movement carried months of being corrected, guilted, cornered, and talked down to until she no longer trusted her own judgment. Linda moved toward her. Sweetheart, you're overwhelmed. Give me Noah and sit down. Rachel stepped back. No. The word was small, but it stood. Linda froze. Victor's voice dropped. You have no idea what you're doing. Rachel's hands tightened around her son. I think I finally do. For a moment, I saw my little sister again. Not the exhausted wife, not the frightened daughter-in-law, but the girl who used to climb trees behind our childhood home and dare me to follow her. Victor turned on me. This is your influence. No, I said. This is your consequence. I gathered the papers into a neat stack. You're leaving now. Linda stared at me like I'd slapped her. You can't throw us out. I can, and I am. Victor grabbed his coat from the back of the sofa, but he didn't move toward the door. Instead, he leaned closer, lowering his voice as if Rachel wouldn't hear. You should think carefully, Major Carter. Family disputes can become unpleasant, especially when there are children involved. The room went still. Rachel's face went white. That was the second mistake Victor made. The documents were serious. The intrusion was serious. But threatening my sister's child in my home, that changed the temperature of everything. I stepped close enough that he had to tilt his chin down to look at me. You will never use that baby as leverage again. He swallowed. Just once. Then covered it with a sneer. Military people always think intimidation solves problems. No, I said. Documentation does. His eyes flicked toward the folder in my hand. There it was again. Fear. Small but real. They left 5 minutes later. Linda tried one last time to touch Rachel's arm, but Rachel moved behind me. Victor walked out first. Shoulders stiff. Pride wounded, but not broken. He still believed this was a setback, not an ending. When the front door closed, Rachel finally collapsed into the kitchen chair. Noah began to fuss. She rocked him automatically, whispering, "It's okay, baby. It's okay." But she wasn't talking to him. She was talking to herself. I locked the door, checked the window, then sat across from her. Tell me everything. And she did. At first, the story came in fragments. Victor's business had been failing for nearly a year. Linda had hidden bills from Daniel. Daniel had taken out one personal loan to help them, then another. Rachel found collection letters tucked inside a drawer at their house. When she confronted Daniel, he cried. He said his parents had nowhere else to go. He said they only needed time. Then Victor learned Rachel was staying with me. After that, the tone changed. Linda began asking questions about my house. How long had I owned it? Was it paid down? Did I have a mortgage? Was I deployed often? Did Rachel receive mail there? At first, Rachel thought it was nosiness. Then Daniel started asking whether I would help the family. Rachel said no before he even finished. That's when Victor arrived with papers. He said I could sign as a resident. Rachel whispered. He said since I live here and since we're sisters, the bank wouldn't question it if the paperwork was structured correctly. My stomach turned. Did you sign anything? She shook her head quickly. No, I swear, I almost did today. He kept saying Daniel would lose everything because of me. He said if his company collapsed, it would be my fault. Then Linda said Noah would grow up knowing his mother destroyed his father's family. Tears slipped down her face again. I reached across the table and placed my hand over hers. You didn't destroy anything. She gave a broken laugh. I let them in. You were scared. I was weak. No, I said. You were isolated. There's a difference. She looked at me, then really looked at me like she hadn't expected forgiveness to arrive so quickly. I took the folder into my office and scanned every page. Then I called my friend Mark Ellison, a civilian attorney in Raleigh who had handled several property fraud cases. I told him only the basics and sent the documents through a secure email. While we waited, Rachel sat in the doorway with Noah asleep against her chest. Neither of us spoke much. The house felt different now. Violated. Not damaged exactly, but touched by something dirty. 20 minutes later, my phone rang. Mark didn't waste time with greetings. Emma, he said, where did these come from? My living room. A pause. Did you sign any of this? No. Did Rachel? No. Another pause, longer this time. Then his voice changed. Careful, professional, concerned. Listen to me. This isn't just an ugly family dispute. Some of these documents appear designed to create fraudulent authority over your property. If they submitted anything like this to a lender, you're looking at potential mortgage fraud, identity fraud, possibly forged instruments. Rachel covered her mouth. I stared at the dark window above my desk and saw my own reflection in the glass. Still uniformed, still calm, but not the same woman who had walked through the door an hour earlier. Mark continued.
Do not confront them further without a plan. Preserve everything.
Texts, voicemails, camera footage, emails, and Emma. Yes, if Victor Graves thinks he's desperate, he may try again fast. I looked toward Rachel and Noah, then back at the folder. Then we'll be ready. That night, Rachel slept in the guest room with Noah's crib pulled close to the bed. I didn't sleep at all. I sat at my kitchen table with a legal pad, my laptop, and a cup of coffee that went cold before I touched it. The house was quiet, except for the occasional settling sound in the walls and the soft murmur of the baby monitor on the counter. Every few minutes I looked toward the staircase, half expecting Victor Graves to appear there, as if arrogance alone could unlock my front door. He didn't. Men like Victor rarely returned in the middle of the night. They preferred daylight. They preferred polite voices, official-looking folders, and rooms where other people felt too embarrassed to make a scene. By sunrise, I had organized everything. Camera footage from the front porch showed Victor and Linda arriving at 1:12 p.m. Rachel let them in at 1:14. Audio inside the living room wasn't perfect, but my security system had captured enough from the hallway camera to prove they had come with documents and pressured her while I was gone. My phone had photos of every page. Rachel had text messages from Linda. Daniel had left 3 voicemails, and Mark Ellison, my attorney friend, had already sent me a list of what to preserve and what not to do. The hardest instruction was simple. Do not scare them off too early. I hated that part. Every instinct in me wanted to drive to Victor's house, throw the folder on his porch, and tell him exactly how close he had come to destroying his own life. But anger is not strategy, and by morning, I understood something important. Victor wasn't finished. He had walked out of my house humiliated, but not defeated. People like him don't retreat because they did wrong. They retreat because they need a better angle. The next angle arrived at 8:37 a.m. A text from Linda. Emma yesterday was emotional for everyone. We should sit down like adults. Rachel is confused and Victor only wants to protect the family. Please don't make this ugly. I read it twice. Then I handed the phone to Rachel. She stood at the kitchen island in one of my old army sweatshirts, her hair tied back, Noah balanced on her hip. She looked younger without makeup, not weak, just worn down. She always does that, Rachel said quietly. She makes it sound like the problem is how we reacted, not what they did. Then we'll let her keep talking. Rachel looked up. What do you mean? I opened a blank message and typed slowly. I need time to think. If this is truly about helping Rachel and Daniel, send me exactly what you wanted signed and why. Rachel stared at the screen. You're answering her. I'm documenting her. I sent it. Linda responded 11 minutes later. Of course, we're relieved you're willing to listen. Victor can explain the structure better. It's not illegal, Emma. Families do this all the time. I almost smiled. People who are about to confess often begin by telling you something isn't illegal. By noon, Victor emailed me. His tone was different in writing, cleaner, smarter. Someone had polished the language, but the meaning still showed through. He explained that his company had a short-term liquidity crisis. He described Rachel as a family resident of my property and suggested that with my informal consent, documents could be structured to establish her authority to pledge limited equity against a bridge loan. Limited equity, bridge loan, informal consent. 3 phrases trying desperately to address theft in a suit. He attached revised paperwork. This time, my name was spelled correctly on every page. That detail made my skin crawl. It meant yesterday's documents weren't sloppy drafts. They were practice. I forwarded everything to Mark. His reply came 10 minutes later. Keep going. Ask how much money. So I did. Victor answered within the hour. $650,000. I sat back in my chair. Rachel covered her mouth. No, she whispered. I read the line again just to be sure my anger hadn't invented a zero. It hadn't. Victor wanted to borrow $650,000 against a house he did not own through authority he did not have, using my sister as the weak link. That was when the case changed shape in my mind. This wasn't panic. This was a plan. A desperate one, maybe, but still a plan. Rachel sank into the chair across from me. Daniel knows. I didn't answer immediately. She stared at the table. He has to know, doesn't he? I don't know. But he asked me about the house. He asked if you'd ever given me permission to handle your mail. He asked if my name was on any utilities here. Her voice cracked. I thought he was just trying to understand where Noah and I were living. I hated what uncertainty did to her face. It made grief worse, because grief at least knows what it has lost. Uncertainty just keeps cutting. We need facts, I said. Rachel wiped her cheeks. I'm tired of facts. I want my husband to be the man I thought he was. That was the first time she said it plainly. Not that Daniel was overwhelmed. Not that his parents were pressuring him. Not that marriage was complicated. Just the truth. She missed a man who might never have existed without his parents' shadow covering him. That afternoon, Daniel called. Rachel froze when his name appeared on her phone. I didn't tell her what to do. That mattered. Victor and Linda had spent months making decisions for her. I would not rescue her by taking her choices away. After a long moment, she put the call on speaker. Rachel, Daniel said, breathless. Thank God. Mom said Emma blew everything up. Rachel closed her eyes. Did you know about the papers? Silence. Not long, but long enough. Ra listened. Did you know? They were trying to help. She gripped the phone so tightly her knuckles widened. Help who? My parents are in real trouble. So you knew they were using Emma's house. No one was using anything. Dad said there was a legal way to Daniel. Her voice steadied. Did you know they were asking me to sign documents connected to a house I don't own? This time the silence was longer. Then Daniel whispered, I thought if you talked to Emma afterward, she'd understand. Rachel looked at me. Something in her expression quietly broke. Not loudly, not dramatically. Just a small collapse behind the eyes. Afterward, she repeated. Daniel began talking fast. I didn't want it this way. Dad said the bank needed movement before Friday. He said if we didn't do something, the company would shut down. Mom's been sick from stress. I didn't know they went over there without telling me. But you knew the plan. Rachel, please. She ended the call. For a few seconds, the kitchen held its breath. Then Noah, sitting in his high chair with a plastic spoon, slapped the tray and laughed. The sound was so innocent it hurt. Rachel walked to him and pressed her forehead to his. I turned away to give her privacy. My phone buzzed. Mark, call me. I stepped into the hallway and answered. His voice was sharp.
Emma, I had a contact look at the lender name on those documents. Victor submitted a preliminary package this morning.
My hand tightened around the phone. Using what authority?
That's the problem. The package includes what appears to be a signed declaration from Rachel stating she has permission to act regarding the property.
Rachel didn't sign anything.
I know, but someone submitted it.
I looked through the doorway at my sister holding her baby. All the air seemed to leave the hall. Mark continued, quieter now. There's more. Daniel's name is on an affidavit as a witness. I closed my eyes. For the first time since this began, I felt the full weight of what Victor had done. He hadn't just targeted my house. He had turned a husband against his wife, a father against his child, and a family against the one person kind enough to give them shelter. Can we stop the loan? Yes, Mark said. But if we stop it too soon, he may claim misunderstanding. If he proceeds after being asked to clarify after sending you these emails, after representing false authority, then he owns it. I understood. We were going to let Victor believe he still had room to maneuver. Not enough room to hurt us, just enough room to expose himself. That evening, I replied to his email. Before I consider anything, I need to understand the signing process. Who prepared the declaration from Rachel? Who witnessed it? And where would you want me to appear? Victor answered 22 minutes later. Come to the lender's office Friday at 10 o'clock. Bring ID. We'll explain everything there. I read it aloud to Rachel. She sat very still. Then she said, I'll go. I turned. You don't have to. Yes, she said. I do. Her voice didn't shake. Not this time. I want them to look at me when the truth comes out. For the first time in days, I saw something stronger than fear in my sister's eyes. I nodded. Then we'll go together. And somewhere across town, Victor Graves believed he had finally cornered two frightened women. He had no idea we had just opened the door and invited him to bury himself. Friday morning arrived gray and humid, the kind of North Carolina day where the air felt heavy before a storm. I woke before dawn, not because I was nervous, because my mind had already moved 3 steps ahead. That habit had followed me through 12 years in the Army. Before every field exercise, every deployment briefing, every operation, I learned the same lesson. People become dangerous when they believe they're about to win. Victor Graves believed he was about to win. That made him predictable, and predictable people make mistakes. By 7 o'clock, Rachel was sitting at the kitchen table drinking coffee she barely touched. Noah sat in his high chair throwing cereal onto the floor. The simple normality of the scene felt strange after everything we'd been through that week. For a moment, I imagined what life could have looked like if Victor and Linda had simply accepted responsibility for their own failures. If Daniel had chosen his wife over his parents years earlier, if fear hadn't been allowed to grow into manipulation. But reality doesn't care about what could have been, only about what is. And what was waiting for us at 10 o'clock was the consequence of dozens of selfish decisions finally catching up with the people who made them. Rachel looked at me. You really think they'll show up? I almost smiled. Oh, they'll show up. People who think they've trapped someone rarely miss the moment they expect to collect their prize. At 9:45 a.m., we parked outside a commercial lending office in Raleigh. The building wasn't impressive, just a modern glass structure surrounded by neatly trimmed shrubs and expensive cars. Victor had chosen the location carefully. Places like this create an illusion of legitimacy. People assume that if something is happening inside a respectable building, it must be respectable. That's exactly what predators count on. Rachel adjusted Noah's diaper bag on her shoulder. Her hands trembled slightly. I squeezed her arm. You okay? She nodded. No. Then she laughed softly. But I'm here. That was enough. Inside, a receptionist directed us toward a conference room. And there they were, Victor, Linda, and Daniel. Victor stood immediately when we entered. The confidence on his face almost impressed me. Almost. Because beneath it, I could see exhaustion. His suit looked expensive but worn. The dark circles under his eyes were impossible to hide. The pressure was finally showing. Linda looked thinner than I remembered, more brittle, like someone desperately trying to maintain control of a life already falling apart. Daniel looked the worst. He barely met Rachel's eyes. Guilt had a way of aging people quickly. Victor spread his arms. Emma, Rachel, thank you for coming. His voice carried the forced warmth of a salesman closing a deal. I took a seat. Rachel sat beside me. Neither of us spoke. Victor launched into his presentation. For nearly 20 minutes, he talked about opportunity, about temporary hardship, about helping family, about trust, about loyalty. He used every polished phrase he could find. Not once did he use the words debt fraud, deception, or pressure. Funny how people avoid the most important words. Finally, he slid a folder across the table. There, he smiled. Everything is structured properly. I opened it. The same documents, the same lies, just packaged more neatly. Victor pointed toward a signature line. If we can finalize today, the funds will be released early next week. I looked up in Rachel's declaration. His smile flickered only slightly. What about it? The declaration claiming she has authority over my property. Daniel suddenly shifted in his chair. Victor ignored him. It's procedural. Who signed it? The room grew quiet. Linda spoke first. It isn't important. That answer told me it was extremely important. I folded my hands. Actually, it's the only thing that matters. Victor's jaw tightened. For the first time, his patience began slipping. Emma, we're wasting time. No, I leaned back. We're finally getting to the truth. Daniel stared at the table. Rachel stared at Daniel. The silence stretched. Then Victor lost control. Not completely, just enough. Do you understand what's at stake? He snapped. Hundreds of jobs, families, years of work. No, I said calmly. What's at stake is whether you tried to steal my house. The room froze. Linda inhaled sharply. Daniel looked physically sick. Victor laughed, a forced, ugly laugh. That's absurd. Is it? I opened my briefcase. His eyes followed the movement. The confidence disappeared. Not all at once, piece by piece, like a building developing cracks. I placed several folders on the table, one by one. Email records, text messages, property documents, bank communications, photographs. The lender representative sitting quietly at the end of the table finally spoke. What exactly is this? I slid a packet toward him. Evidence. Victor went pale. Rachel later told me that was the exact moment she realized he knew he was finished. Because innocent people get angry, guilty people get scared. The lender representative began reading. The room became silent except for pages turning. Victor tried to interrupt. The man raised a hand. Please sit down. Victor sat. For the first time all morning, he looked small. The lender representative continued reading. His expression changed gradually. Confusion, concern, disbelief, then something closer to alarm. Finally, he looked directly at Victor. Mr. Graves, these documents raised serious questions. Linda's face lost all color. Victor tried to recover. This is a misunderstanding. No, another voice said. Everyone turned. The conference room door opened. 3 people entered. Mark Ellison, a senior fraud investigator from the bank, and a Raleigh police detective. The room exploded. What is this? Linda shouted. This is insane! Victor stood. This is harassment. The detective remained calm. Please sit down, sir. Daniel looked like he might faint. Rachel simply watched. For months, perhaps years, these people had controlled every room they entered, every conversation, every decision. Now the room belonged to someone else. The investigator opened a file. Mr. Graves, we've identified multiple discrepancies involving submitted financial documents. Victor's forehead glistened with sweat. Discrepancies, potentially fraudulent declarations, another page. Potentially forged authorizations, another page. Misrepresentation of ownership interests. Daniel covered his face. Linda began crying. Actual crying, not the manipulative version. Fear. Pure fear. The detective spoke next. At this stage, we're gathering information. We strongly advise you not to destroy records, contact witnesses regarding testimony, or attempt to alter documentation. Victor looked at me, not with anger, not even hatred, something else. The realization that the person he thought he was manipulating had spent the entire week documenting him. His voice became almost desperate. "Emma, we can work this out." I stared at him. The same man who had sat in my living room, the same man who had watched my sister cry, the same man who had threatened her using her child, and suddenly, he wanted cooperation. Funny how that works. "No," I said quietly. "We can't." Rachel finally spoke, the first words she'd directed at him all morning. "You could have asked for help." Victor looked stunned, she continued. "You could have told the truth." Linda sobbed harder. Daniel's shoulders collapsed. Rachel shook her head. "But instead, you tried to take from the people who trusted you." No one had anything to say to that, because it was true. The investigator gathered his files. The detective exchanged a few final words with the lender representative. The meeting ended shortly afterward, but Victor's nightmare was only beginning. As we stood to leave, the detective stopped him. "Mr. Graves?" Victor turned slowly. The detective handed him a business card. "We'll be contacting you soon." I watched every drop of blood drain from his face. For the first time since this entire ordeal began, Victor Graves looked exactly like what he was. Not powerful, not clever, not in control. Just a frightened man watching the consequences finally arrive. And as Rachel and I walked out of that conference room together, I knew something important. The battle was over. Now came the fallout. The first phone call came 4 days later. I was mowing the lawn when my phone vibrated in my pocket. The display showed Daniel's name. For a moment, I considered letting it ring. Not because I hated him. Strangely enough, I didn't. By then, I'd learned something about people like Daniel. Not everyone who causes damage is malicious. Some are simply weak, and weakness can destroy lives just as effectively as cruelty. I turned off the mower and answered, "Hello?" For several seconds, I heard nothing. Then Daniel spoke. His voice sounded exhausted. "They searched my father's office." I leaned against the handle of the mower. "Okay, they took computers." Another pause. "Boxes of records." I wasn't surprised. The fraud investigator had been very interested in Victor's financial history. Once lenders start looking closely, they tend to discover things people hoped would remain buried. Daniel swallowed audibly. I didn't know how bad it was. I looked across the yard. Rachel was sitting on a blanket beneath an oak tree while Noah crawled through the grass, chasing bubbles she blew from a small plastic wand. For the first time in months, she looked peaceful. Not happy, not yet, but peaceful. The difference matters. "Did you call to tell me that?" I asked. "No." His voice cracked. "I called because Rachel won't answer." I remained silent. "I know I don't deserve forgiveness." He laughed bitterly. "Honestly, I don't even know if I deserve a conversation." That was probably the most honest thing I'd ever heard him say. After another long silence, I finally replied, "Then stop worrying about what you deserve." "What does that mean?" "It means start worrying about what your son deserves." The line went quiet. I could almost hear him processing the words. Then he whispered, "I miss him." I looked at Noah. The little boy had discovered a dandelion and was staring at it with complete fascination. Children make life simple. Adults make it complicated. You should have thought about that sooner. I know. And for once, I believed him. The investigation expanded rapidly after that, much faster than even Mark had expected. The lender uncovered inconsistencies in multiple loan applications connected to Victor's company. Then another bank found questionable documentation. Then another, like cracks spreading through ice. Every week seemed to reveal another problem, another discrepancy, another lie. The story that emerged was ugly. Victor's company had been struggling for years, not months, years. Instead of downsizing, restructuring, or admitting failure, he had borrowed, then borrowed again, then hidden losses, then shifted money, then concealed more losses. By the time he targeted my property, he wasn't trying to save a healthy business. He was trying to delay a collapse that had already happened. Linda had known far more than she admitted. That revelation seemed to shock everyone except Rachel. She later confessed that part of her had suspected it for a long time. Love doesn't make people blind. Fear does. And Linda had spent years teaching everyone around her to fear disappointing her. By autumn, the company was gone. Bankruptcy proceedings followed. Former employees began speaking openly. Former partners came forward. Old financial records resurfaced. Victor had spent decades building a reputation. Watching it unravel took only a few months. One evening, Rachel and I sat on my back porch after Noah had fallen asleep. The air smelled faintly of rain. Crickets chirped in the darkness. For a while, neither of us spoke. Then Rachel asked the question I'd been expecting for weeks. "Do you think they're evil?" I considered it carefully, because life is rarely that simple. Finally, I shook my head. No. She looked surprised. I continued, "I think they're selfish." "What's the difference?" "Selfish people convince themselves they're good. That's what makes them dangerous." Rachel stared into the darkness. I could tell she was thinking about every holiday dinner, every guilt trip, every manipulation, every time Victor or Linda had framed their demands as love. Eventually, she nodded. "Yeah." A sad smile touched her face. "That sounds right." Several weeks later, she filed for legal separation. It wasn't dramatic. There were no screaming matches, no revenge speeches, no movie-style confrontations. Just paperwork, signatures, quiet tears, and acceptance. Daniel didn't fight it. I think by then he understood that some things once broken never returned to their original shape. To his credit, he began showing up consistently for Noah. Not perfectly, consistently. And sometimes that's where redemption begins. One ordinary Tuesday afternoon, almost 7 months after I came home early and found Rachel crying on my kitchen floor, she walked into my office carrying a cardboard box. "What is that?" She smiled. "My apartment keys." I stared at her. "You got it?" She nodded. A real smile this time, the kind I hadn't seen in years. "I got it." For a moment, neither of us moved. Then I stood and hugged her. She laughed through tears. "I thought I'd never start over." "Most people do," I said. "They just don't know it yet." The apartment wasn't large. It wasn't luxurious, but it was hers. Every bill, every decision, every responsibility, every victory, hers. Watching her rebuild her confidence was more satisfying than anything that happened to Victor. Far more satisfying, because revenge can feel good, but healing feels better. A month later, Rachel invited me over for dinner. Noah sat in a high chair decorated with cartoon dinosaurs. The kitchen smelled like baked chicken and rosemary. A tiny framed family photo sat on the counter. Just Rachel and Noah. Nothing fancy, nothing expensive, just peace. As I watched my nephew laugh at something only toddlers find funny, Rachel suddenly grew quiet. "What?" I asked. She looked at me, her eyes softened. "If you hadn't come home early that day, I already knew where she was going." "You don't know that?" "Yes, I do." She shook her head slowly. "I was exhausted. I was scared. They kept pushing. They kept saying Daniel would lose everything." A tear rolled down her cheek. "I think I might have signed." The room became silent. I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "You didn't." "But I almost did." I nodded. "Almost doesn't count." For several seconds, she stared at our hands. Then she smiled. A real one. The kind that comes after surviving something, not before. That night after dinner, I drove home beneath a sky filled with stars. When I pulled into my driveway, I sat in my truck for a few moments before going inside. The house looked exactly the same as it had the day I returned early from training. Same porch, same windows, same front door. But it felt different, warmer somehow, because now I understood something I hadn't fully appreciated before. A house isn't valuable because of what it's worth. It's valuable because of who it protects. Victor and Linda thought they were coming for a piece of property, a deed, an asset, a source of money. What they failed to understand was that they were really attacking a family. And in the end, that family stood together. Not perfectly, not without scars, but together. The irony still makes me shake my head. Victor Graves thought he walked into my house to take something from me. Instead, he lost everything he spent a lifetime building. And Rachel, she found herself again. If this story touched you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever known someone who used guilt, family loyalty, or fear to control the people around them? Leave a comment below and tell me where you're watching from. And if you enjoy stories about resilience, justice, family, and finding the strength to stand up when it matters most, please subscribe and join us. We share new stories every day, and I'd be honored to have you along for the journey. Until next time, take care of yourself and the people who truly deserve a place in your home and your heart.